The eyes of the country have moved to the 2020 presidential elections, but across Pennsylvania and especially in Northampton County, the fallout from the 2019 election continues. With new voting machines coming to the state, what happened in the 2019 municipal elections? Can we trust these machines? And what does 2020 look like across Pennsylvania? Tom Shortell of the Morning Call joins me to break down those questions and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm your host, Sam Chen. The country is looking toward the 2020 presidential elections. No doubt Pennsylvania will play another key role as it did in 2016. But here in the Keystone State, the fallout from the 2019 election continues. Weeks removed, there continues to be conversations about the new voting machines that are coming across the state in next year's elections, specifically in Northampton County. So what happened on election night? Where do we stand now? And what does this mean for the 2020 presidential elections? I'm pleased to be joined tonight by Tom Shortell of the Morning Call to discuss those questions and more. Tom, welcome back to the show. Thanks again for joining me. I'm glad we didn't scare you away the first time.
It's good to be here. Thanks, Sam.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. Generally, I think we love to brag about Tom Shortell, the road warrior. But you also cover county government, and you've done that for a while with the Morning Call. This is a situation that I don't know that we necessarily saw coming. Certainly, it's a big deal, and it's something that across the state conversations are happening. Like I said in the intro, everyone's looking at the 2020 elections. We just had another Democratic presidential debate, but the 2019 election is still very much in heated conversation. At the center of these conversations are new voting machines. Let's just start from the very top. Can you talk to us a little bit about why there are new voting machines? What put us in this situation in the first place? Why the machines this in 2019? Are they coming in 2020? What's that whole situation about?
Sure. So during the 2016 presidential elections, the U.S. intelligence community determined that there were efforts to hack into individual states' databases, voter databases, try to see if foreign agents could get their hands on that information. And as part of a wider security crackdown to kind of bolster our defenses on that front, the Governor Wolf ordered that new voting machines come into play. And as part of that order, these voting machines need to have a paper backup, something that could be audited. In Northampton County, for example, we used to have these touchscreen voting machines. They'd been around for about a decade. They were generally well liked. But if something went wrong, if a file was corrupted on some of these machines or something like that, then you could potentially lose all the votes from those machines. And so that's why they ordered these paper backups come out. Okay. But now the state goes out, they audit these machines, they determine their security, they do their own internal testing, the federal government does as well. And so so the state forms a list of machines that it certifies. The counties can use these machines. The individual counties then go out and determine what voting process they're going to allow.
Okay.
And in Northampton County and Lehigh County, they followed these rules and kind of reached two different conclusions as to what type of machines they wanted.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit? I mean, so what I'm gathering is it's almost like the healthcare marketplace, where there's a number of approved plans that each county gets to choose exactly which machine they want to use for their elections. Which way did Northampton go? Which way did Lehigh go?
Northampton County went with something that was somewhat similar to their old one. It's another large touchscreen voting machine. And everything's right in front of you. You can, there's actually some handy little upgrades where you can increase the size of the font.
Okay.
So if you if your vision's not great, you can increase that, and everything's right in front of you. You can select what you want and vote as needed. But to get to the paper backup, when you sign in to vote, you're eventually handed this little slip of paper. It's kind of like what you see get as a receipt when you go shopping.
Okay.
When you go to vote, you feed that piece of paper into the machine. You make your selections, and then the paper comes out into a little window. It's not handed back to you, but it's allowed. You look at that and you're asked, do the names on this list match the people you voted for on the screen?
Okay.
And if it's yes, you're supposed to click yes, and the machine swallows that and stores it in its innards.
Okay.
So that this way, hours later, days later, whatever, someone can go back and hand count all those papers to see it matches the electronic results.
Okay. So it records both a digital vote as well as a paper vote.
Right.
So okay, so there's essentially two records being made here. If the digital one gets hacked or corrupted, there's a paper backup.
Precisely. Okay. Right.
What? And you said this was really done to combat election fraud. An idea. So 2020 across the state, they need to make us. They don't all need to pick that machine, is what you're saying.
No.
But they need to make some selection, upgrade their machines into one of the acceptable offerings.
And Lehigh County, in fact, kind of went with a different action where people aren't voting with the machine, so to speak.
Okay.
They have paper ballots. Kind of looks like those Scantron tests you had back in high school,
Sure.
the SATs. This time you're allowed to use a pen. Doesn't have to be a number 2 pencil. But you fill in the bubbles next to the names that you want.
Okay.
And then once you're done, you walk up to a machine that scans it. And so it makes essentially a PDF of that vote.
Okay.
And then again, the machine swallows the paper, and so you have the paper ballot and a digital copy. It's just two different ways of getting to the same place.
Okay. Does that? And this is a little bit off top from where we're going, but does that take longer? I mean, is that a situation where with the presidential election coming up? I mean, we know lines can be long.
That's a good question, and it's hard to say because both systems were new this year.
Sure.
People reported longer lines in both counties. Large part of that is probably unfamiliarity.
Sure.
And as we'll get into, there were problems in Northampton County, which didn't help the lines. So it's really hard to make a comparison right now to see which one is faster.
Sure. Let's get into the problems that happened in Northampton County. I remember election night, we're all watching returns, right? Whatever election party we're at, we're watching returns. And we're watching, generally speaking, in the political world, right? We watch different sources. So we have WFMZ on, we're following the Morning Call website. We've got the official county and state websites up. And there's one thing that's consistent, which is the numbers in Northampton County aren't adding up. And so to give you an example, at 32% reporting, so about a third of the county votes counted, John Morganelli, the district attorney running for judge, has 10,994 votes, which we all figure is about right. Victor Scamilio, one of the Republican candidates running for judge, again, there's 2 judge seats in Northampton, had 5,995 votes. Attorney Scamilio's opponent was the Democrat, Attorney Abe Cassis, has 6 votes. Right. And there's this moment where we look at this and we say, wait a minute, that either Abe Cassis has run the worst campaign in the history of campaigns, or something's happened. What was happening in Northampton County that night?
That is a great question that, as of right now, people still don't have an answer to.
Okay.
The voting machines, the results that we saw come up on the Northampton County website, from on WFMZ, on the Morning Call's website, all those were taken off of the electronic version of the Northampton County voting machine. So again, there's 2 versions: there's paper and there's electronic. The electronic version, for whatever reason, failed to count almost all of the votes for Mr. Cassis in that race, to the point where it would be nearly impossible for a candidate to get just 6 votes for a county-wide race. And this is one of the larger counties in Pennsylvania. So it's like a statistical impossibility to do that. And so what they wound up doing, They wound up presenting official results Wednesday morning. They stayed up all night, and they did it by counting the paper version.
Okay.
Because after the normal way they do it, to get it quick, they do the digital. It's easier to do that way, but it very clearly was wrong.
And so I know around like 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that, there was Northampton County announced they were going to move into a paper recount. Now, when they say that, what they're doing is they are actually now going to collect all those paper ballots that the machines have stored.
Right.
And they're going to hand count them. Is that right?
Not at that point.
Okay.
What they have machines that can pretty quickly get through all those votes, but you have to remember they're scattered throughout the county.
Correct.
They're up in they're like 20 miles away from Easton in some cases, where the county seat is. So it takes a while for those tabulations to take place, even with a pretty fast counting system.
Sure.
And there's also a human element too. The people loading the machines, checking that they have to make sure that everything is accounted for, because at this point it's pretty clear that there needs to be an audit, there needs to be an investigation. So you can't just grab a bunch of stacks of paper and stick them in. You have to know where they came from, which machine they came from, who handled it, and make sure that it's being stored appropriately, so that you're not inadvertently tampering with a recount at another point.
And that all needs to be documented then too, I imagine.
Right in front of, I'm told that there were there were observers with both political parties on hand, or at minimum it was open to them.
Right.
We sent a reporter there, and they were not allowed into the room that night.
Okay.
But we were allowed to observe later during what's called canvassing, which is a more standard recount.
Right. Okay. This is riveting, Tom. Don't go away. I want us to pick up right where we left off. We're going to take a break. We'll be back right after these messages. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Tom, thanks again for joining us. This is a huge issue that we're talking about. I want to pick up right where we left off with what happened on election night 2019, early November, Northampton County. We're past midnight, and the county suddenly orders now a recount of the paper ballots.
I'm not sure if it's technically a recount, but yeah,
they're
going through. They're now counting the paper ballots to come up with an official result.
Sure. And you had mentioned before we went to break that at this point they're still not sure yet exactly what malfunctioned in those voting machines.
Right.
A few of the reports that have come out, and I'd love for you to speak to this. Just a few of the reports. Some people said that the touch screen was a bit sensitive. It didn't record all the votes. We know that happened for sure, that some of these votes somehow record digitally did not make it through. That backup paper ballots were difficult to read in some places. At some point, Northampton County judges Daly and Corey also filed legal motion during the election. Now they're both up for retention. Could you speak to that a little bit? What was happening there? This was not just election night, suddenly all the complaints came out.
Right.
Throughout the course of the day, we were hearing these reports.
Yeah, and one quick thing, the size of the paper, that's actually Lehigh County. They're the ones that had to physically feed it in. I haven't heard Northampton County had that problem, but they've had a lot of problems. Pretty early on, people became aware that there were issues there are two different types of issues. There's ones with the machines, interacting with the machines. As you mentioned, there's hypersensitivity. I know while I was voting, and I'm a Northampton County resident, I was going to touch the screen, and it lit up before. It was like maybe a centimeter or so off of it. So it was just really sensitive. So
you hadn't even tapped it yet?
I hadn't tapped it yet, but it sensed, it was able to sense, I think they're heat sensitive or something like that. It was able to sense that so it ticked off. Now, in my case, it didn't matter because it was the button I was going to push anyway, but other people have just been reading or something like that, and now it's easy to correct that because you go, oh, that's not right, and you click it, and it's really, doesn't matter what lights up until you press the vote button, records everything. But obviously that is a concern.
Sure.
There are other problems where people reported that they had, they're hypersensitive at some screens. There are problems by getting to sense what you wanted at all in other spots. And in the judicial retention race, you mentioned 2 judges who were currently who are currently on the bench were concerned enough that they filed paperwork asking the court to send out special instructions to the 155 precincts in the county, so that people know that if you're having a problem, if it's not if you're having a hard time for the right buttons to light up like you want it to flag down a poll worker and let them know that they're having, and make sure that they're able to vote the way they want to.
Sure.
And so that hearing, the first hearing I think was before noon. So
Okay.
they knew pretty early on that there were going to be
Before
issues.
noon on election day.
Right.
So polls open at 7 a.m. So we're just hours into election day, and these hearings are already taking place.
Right.
What did Northampton County do during the election? I mean, did they issue extra instructions? What did they do to try to rectify this? I mean, obviously you can't cancel an election and restart when you're halfway through it.
Right. So they complied with the judicial order. They sent instructions to the precincts to make sure that voters knew that if you have problems getting to light up the way you want it to flag down a poll worker, they should be able to help you, and to reiterate that, make sure that the paper ballot, which comes down the window after you make your selections, make sure that matches what the selections you wanted to make. Don't just go yeah,
Sure.
and send it on its way. And so the county complied with that. The county agreed with those orders, and so those were steps that were taken during the election process.
The machines, the numbers, the state of Pennsylvania projected for 2020, as every county is starting to move toward new machines, is going to cost $150 million, $90 million of which the state is planning on providing themselves through some form of grant. In Northampton County, $2.88 million on this round of machines. The residents want that back. They think the county deserves that back. Where does this go moving forward? Because this is if I'm not mistaken, counties need to have new machines by next year, by the primary. So where does Northampton go moving forward?
Yeah, Governor Wolf's order for the new machines was to take place for the November election, I believe,
Okay.
of 2020. A lot of counties, including Northampton, including Lehigh, got them ready for this municipal election as kind of a warm-up, because the turnout in the local races is not nearly what it is in the presidential races. And so they wanted to make sure that if they had any issues, it was going to be this time around, and not when 70% of the people are showing up in it's going to be a hotly contested presidential
And
election.
imagine this happening next year.
That would be very, very bad. Like, this isn't good. That would be very, very bad.
Yeah, agreed.
And so that's kind of the background there. As for the request about wanting the money back, a lot of elected officials in Northampton County have made those remarks as well.
Okay.
They're not satisfied. They think that some have said that they want to imply that if this isn't fixed pronto, or if they're not made satisfied, that they will look elsewhere. There hasn't been an official order or anything like this, it's just talk. The trick is the trick goes into kind of the technicalities of how these decisions are made.
Okay.
You don't want politicians having their hands directly into election matters.
Sure.
So you appoint people to election boards.
Right.
It's supposed to be bipartisan. It's supposed to make sure that it's a safeguard against monkey business in elections.
Right.
So it's not necessarily up to the elected officials directly to go out and make these decisions. They can voice their opinions, they can make pressure, but it's up to the local election boards, election commissions, some of them have different names, different counties, to make these changes. The county government really just supplies, so the county council in Northampton case supplies the money for these things to be made, but they don't determine what machines are used.
Yeah. Do you think, asking, looking to a crystal ball here, do you think Northampton may go with a different machine, or is that yet? I mean, is that
That's
really
a hard
possible?
call, because there's going to be different people on that board next year.
Okay.
Just like politicians, there
Sure,
are terms,
sure. Okay.
and the terms happen to change next year. So there's going to be different people. Last time it was a 3-2 vote. There were 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat supported getting these machines, as opposed to the paper system
Sure.
and then put into the machine.
That we had counties using.
Right.
Okay.
And so it's not clear where it goes from here. It's also would be pretty expensive.
Sure.
You're not guaranteed that you're going to get that money back. And they just sunk almost $3 million into this version. So there's potentially a fight to get that money back. And then you have to purchase new machines, train people how to use them, and make sure that everything runs smoothly in the presidential election. It's a tight window.
Yeah.
So it's I couldn't tell you how this is going to work out.
Sure. Speaking of the presidential election, that's next year. Let's say Northampton County keeps these machines, or they go with a different machine, which they will then be using for the first time next year. Is there concern? I mean, I know you report on county government. Is there concern among the county leaders and the people that we're not in the place that we're necessarily ready for 2020?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the disappointment has been aimed at the company that makes the machines.
Okay.
It's ES&S, Electronic Systems and Software.
Sure.
They make half of the machines, half the country votes on one of their machines.
Okay.
Not necessarily the one in Northampton County, but on a machine that they make is used
Across the country.
Yeah, all over the place. And so they've not been shy about expressing their disappointment in them and in demanding that they make the county whole in some way. But what that some way is hasn't been spelled out.
Sure. And this is not the first time this company's gotten a complaint about one of their machines.
No, they're like I said, they're an enormous company. I think it's 70 million people in the U.S. vote on one of their machines.
Sure.
And so, it's hard to say whether it's the company itself that's having a problem, or if it's just they're everywhere, and so they're bound to run into problems. It's hard to make that distinction. But no, they've had problems in Georgia, Florida, Indiana. This isn't the first time that complaints have popped up about one of their machines.
Fair enough, fair enough. Tom, this is great. Thank you again for your insights on this. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Tom, thanks again for breaking this down. I know this is an important issue, especially when you look at 2016, the role that Pennsylvania played in that presidential election. We were the state, when called, that put President Trump over the electoral vote threshold. And then also it was tight in this state. I mean, the president only won by the slimmest of margins. Senator Toomey won his reelection by just I think a little bit over 1 or 2 percentage points. A lot of very tight races. Congressman Fitzpatrick, even in south of us in 2018, a tight race. Congressman Scott Perry down in south central Pennsylvania in a tight race. And so these are small margins that if machines don't work, we could have quite the issue in 2020. Let me ask you, when you mentioned that during this election, there were, especially Judge Daly, Judge Corey, as elections going on, there's already hearings happening about, can we give extra instructions? And this is not something that just when the polls closed, we had an issue. What happens if you're a voter in 2020, in the primary, in the general, and you're using a machine, this one, another one, and you can't get it, you can't vote on it, you can't get to light up, you can't get something to go your way? What should you do as a voter?
The first thing you should do is call over a poll worker.
Okay.
They might be able to help you get the machine to work. It's possible you're doing something wrong. You might be pushing the wrong buttons if it's an electronic machine as opposed to a paper ballot. So they might be able to help you on hand. If that doesn't work, they should be able to allow you to vote through another means.
Okay.
So if the machine is in fact broken or not responding the right way, you should be allowed to vote on an emergency ballot or a provisional ballot, something that will record your vote and allow it to be entered into the system.
Okay.
If you're not satisfied with what they tell you, you have a couple of options. You can file a complaint with the state, with the Pennsylvania Department of State.
Okay.
They will most likely then forward it on to the county for them to look into and to take an account into it. You can also reach out to an advocacy group. Oftentimes, if you're registered with a party, you can notify them. So if you're a Democrat, get a hold of the local Democratic Party. If you're a Republican, get a hold of the local Republican Party. Let them know that you have these problems. Get it on record. And so now, depending on how widespread it is, depending on how close these races are, they will have. They're more likely than you are to have the resources to contest a race if it comes down to the wire, if there's something close, or if the issues are so widespread that it would make even a large margin questionable.
Sure. Somewhat, perhaps something that happened like in Northampton County, potentially something like that.
Yeah, and I know that I know that quite a few residents filed complaints with the state. Obviously, the local political parties knew. I mean, the judges. They may not have been in chambers that day or in the court, but they got word pretty early on that something was wrong. So word was moving through the grapevine, and it got to the people that it needed to, so that these challenges could be issued.
That's great advice. If something goes wrong, say something. Make sure your vote gets counted.
Yeah.
Tom, thank you for joining us and for breaking this down for us. Really appreciate it. I'm sure we're going to have you back again, especially as 2020 rolls in.
Very good.
Appreciate it. That is all the time we have tonight. My thanks to Tom Shortell for joining us, breaking down this imperative situation involving our voting machines in Northampton County and coming across the state of Pennsylvania next year. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.